We are joined now by the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff. Congressman, thanks for joining us this morning. I want to begin with President Trump's tweet from yesterday. Put it up on screen there. He says the memo totally vindicates Trump in probe, but the Russia witch hunt goes on and on. There was no collusion. There was no obstruction. The word now used because after 1 year of looking endlessly and finding nothing, collusion is dead. This is an American disgrace. The memo vindicates Trump?
Of course, not at all. And in fact, on the issue of collusion, what the memo indicates is the investigation didn't begin with Carter Page. It actually began with George Papadopoulos, someone who was a foreign policy advisor for candidate Trump, and someone who was meeting secretly with the Russians and talking about the stolen Clinton emails. So quite to the contrary, even this very flawed memo demonstrates what the origin of the investigation was, and that origin involved the issue of collusion.
And that's one of the problems you've pointed out with the memo. I want to dig into some of the other ones that have been raised. Number one, the memo says that the FISA court should have been told that the dossier was financed by Democrats and Hillary Clinton's campaign. That's relevant information, isn't it?
It is relevant information to alert the FISA court. Is there a political motivation? Was there a political actor involved? And the court was notified a political actor was involved, and that's part of the misleading nature of the FISA application. In terms of the identity of the political actor, the most important information for the court is what did Christopher Steele know? And Glenn Simpson has testified that Christopher Steele was not told the identity of the lawyer or the party behind the lawyer. That's the most important information evaluating Christopher Steele's bias.
But you're saying the court was told that the dossier was funded by a political actor?
Yes, that there was a political actor behind it. And this is, again, part of the misleading character of this document. And George, I want to, comment on this claim by my Republican colleagues that this is oversight. They're just doing this as a matter of oversight in asking these questions about why wasn't this included. If this was oversight, the committee members would want to read the underlying documents. I made a motion to allow them to read the documents. They voted it down. I made a motion to bring the FBI in and ask the FBI these questions. You know, why was this included? Why was that not included? That's what oversight looks like. That's the oversight we've done for 10 years.
You've read the underlying documents.
I have, and they voted that down. They voted against hearing from the FBI. When you do oversight, you haul them in under oath. You say, why was this included? Why wasn't that included? The interest wasn't oversight. The interest was a political hit job on the FBI in the service of the president.
They also point out in the memo a quote from Andrew McCabe, the former deputy director of the FBI, who they say said no surveillance warrant would have been sought from the FISA court without the Steele dossier information. I know you said McCabe didn't say that. Here's how Chairman Nunes responded on Fox.
And that is definitely what he said. Not to mention, we have other witnesses who said very similar things.
Is it true that the FBI led the FISA application with the dossier?
Yeah, most of the largest percentage of the entire application has to do with the dossier and then using the news story to corroborate the dossier.
Your response to the chairman?
Well, the chairman is wrong. Now, the chairman also hasn't read the underlying materials, but for example, the argument that the Yahoo News article was circular reporting because it was based on something Christopher Steele said, that's not what the article was cited for. And if you read the application, you would know that's not what the article was cited for. But the whole point here is not to be accurate. The point is to be misleading. The Democrats didn't even get to read the memo until minutes before it was voted out to the House. If they were truly interested in getting to the truth, that's not the process that they would use. Instead, they used a vehicle that has never been used before in the history of the House to release this very one-sided memorandum. In terms of Andy McCabe, like the memorandum itself, they cherry-pick selectively in what he said. Now, while I can't go into the specifics of his testimony, I can tell you what he said was that you have to look at a FISA application as a cohesive whole. All the parts are important. And the suggestion that the chairman makes there and others on the committee have made also that the entire dossier was included in this is just plain false.
You're responsible for oversight as well. Did the FBI make any mistakes here?
Well, we don't know because we haven't had the opportunity to bring the FBI in before the committee and ask them these questions, which in a normal oversight process we would have the opportunity to do. But the goal here really isn't to find out the answers from the FBI. The goal here is to undermine the FBI, discredit the FBI, discredit the Mueller investigation, do the president's bidding. From the midnight run that Chairman made to the White House to present documents he'd actually gotten from the White House to today, it's all part of the same. And indeed, the chairman wouldn't answer the question about whether his staff was working with the White House on this memorandum. So this is, I think...
Inside the committee. He answered on Fox and said there was no working with the White House.
Well, there's a reason I think he wouldn't answer that question in committee. And the reality is...
So you believe that his staff worked with the White House?
I think it's very possible his staff worked with the White House and coordinated the whole effort with the White House because it looks so much like this earlier effort, which we know was coordinated with the White House by the same chairman who had said that he would recuse himself, but of course hasn't.
Do you think this memo could be part of an obstruction case?
I don't know whether members of Congress can be part of an obstruction case in the exercise of their duties, even as ill-intentioned as they are, but the president's use of this, the president's decision, for example, I'm going to release the memo even though the FBI says it's inaccurate, even though the Department of Justice says it's reckless, and what's more, I've made that decision without even reading it. That could be evidence of the president's intent to interfere.
Well, the president
in the
did say he read the memo.
Well, at the time he said, apparently, to a member during the State of the Union, he hadn't read the memo. That's what the White House was saying.
You know, you talked about this strategy to discredit the Mueller investigation. Is it working?
Well, I don't think it's working in the sense that people have a lot of confidence in Bob Mueller, but it is impeaching the FBI. And the problem with this, and this is, I think, at the heart of the department's concern, is if you have a neighbor who's buying fertilizer, lots of fertilizer, but has no yard, and you have concerns about it, and you want to call the FBI, you're now going to wonder, is that FBI going to hold my name in confidence or this information in confidence? What if this becomes politicized? Sources are going to dry up because of what the Republicans on this committee are doing now. There's a compact between our committee and the intelligence community. You give us your deepest held secrets, we will hold them in good confidence. We won't abuse them. They're going to share a lot less with us now, and other sources of information are going to decide not to share with the FBI because they can't rely on our committee not to be partisan in the handling of that information, and that's a deep disservice which ultimately makes the country less safe.
Congressman Schiff, thanks for your time this morning.
Thanks, George.
And we are joined now by a Republican member of the committee, Congressman Will Hurd of Texas. Thanks for coming in.
Always a pleasure.
This morning, you just heard Congressman Schiff right there say this is going to cause a loss of confidence in the Intelligence Committee. Your response?
I don't believe so. I think we have to hold the intelligence community, the federal law enforcement, to high standards. I spent almost a decade as an undercover officer in the CIA, being the guy in the back alleys collecting intelligence. And we know that we are supposed to be held to a higher standard. And when political leaders of an organization, we should be making sure they're crossing every T and dotting every I.
It's not just Democrats who've criticized this memo. James Comey, former FBI director, came out with this tweet. I want to put it up right there. He says, that's it. Dishonest and misleading memo wrecked the House Intel Committee, destroyed trust with intelligence community, damaged relationship with FISA court, and inexcusably exposed classified intelligence of an American citizen. For what? DOJ and FBI must keep doing their jobs. What's your response to James Comey?
Well, I would say that DOJ and FBI should continue doing the job. I don't believe this is an attack on Bob Mueller. I don't believe this is an attack on the men and women in the FBI. I've served shoulder to shoulder with them, and they're hardworking folks that keep us safe. What this is about is a couple of things. Should unverified information be able to be used to spy on an American? Should circular reporting be used to spy on an American?
You just say it wasn't circular reporting if you had read the underlying intelligence.
So a press release or some newspaper article should be able to be used in order to spy on an American. That newspaper article was all based off the information that they already had access to. And what's interesting is nobody is questioning whether some of the information was unverified, right? Nobody's questioning that. Nobody's questioning that there was rumors that were involved in this. And for me, this is about making sure that we're protecting the civil liberties of Americans.
But as the congressman who's read all the underlying materials just said that is only one part of a very large file that was presented to the judge.
Well, when you introduced me today, you didn't say I was from San Antonio or I spent all my life in Texas. That doesn't change the fact that I'm a Republican member of Congress, right? You know, the information that we're talking about is unverified. Nobody questions that. And the gentleman from California.
Which information is unverified?
Most of the information in the Steele dossier, what information there is verified?
Because you didn't read the underlying documents.
We don't have to read the underlying documents because we've had, and the gentleman from California said that we haven't interviewed the FBI or DOJ on this. You know, I've spent countless hours in hearings with DOJ and FBI asking questions about this. So I've had the opportunity to ask the people that created the underlying document about this, and that's what came to some of the conclusions and why I voted to release the memo.
You voted against releasing the Democratic memo. Why?
There was information in there that I did believe led to erosion of national security. There was some references to ongoing intelligence operations. I believe they're working through that, and it's going to, and we're going to vote on it.
Why not wait until that was scrubbed the same way the Republican memo was scrubbed, so they could both be put out at the same time?
Well, the information wasn't ready to go, and so we decided to release ours. People can criticize that decision, but I think providing oversight and shining a light on these issues is important because ultimately, I do believe we're letting the Russians win. The Russians got involved in our elections to erode trust in our democratic institutions. And when the press is criticizing Congress for shining light on issues, when Republicans and Democrats can't agree on stuff just because it was originated by someone in the other party, when there's a perceived friction between the executive branch, the legislative branch, and federal law enforcement, when people think that there shouldn't be oversight, civilian oversight of law enforcement.
On oversight, if you had real concerns, why not call the FBI director in a closed session, as is normally done, ask him those questions?
We did. We did. There have been dozens of hours of conversations around this, and the reason we found this was because of the broader Russia investigation. But to me, this does not. I want to stress. Bob Mueller should be allowed to turn over every rock, pursue every lead, so that we can have trust in knowing what actually the Russians did or did not do.
So you don't agree with President Trump when he says this vindicates him in the entire Russia investigation?
I don't. I don't agree with some of my colleagues that say, you know, it was always using the words explosive. I'm not shocked that elected officials are using hyperbole and exaggerations. But this is about, for me, what kind of information should be used in a Title III court in order to spy on American citizens. Our civil liberties are important. You know, most people, I was just back in my hometown of San Antonio, I didn't get asked a lot of questions about this, right? Most people are worried about how do they pay their rent bill, how do they make sure they have enough money for their kids to go to college. But the fact that we have to protect our civil liberties, this is one of the things that has made our country great. And so we should be focused on this, and Congress should do its oversight role, even in a crazy partisan environment.
I wonder what your complaint is here, though. Carter Page, the man at the center of this right now. And we just heard from Congressman Schiff that, in fact, the FBI investigation began with George Papadopoulos and the intelligence he gave to the Australian intelligence official. But let's talk about Carter Page here for a second. He'd been on the radar of the FBI as possibly working the Russians back to 2013. In order to get a FISA warrant, you have to show probable cause that this person is a foreign agent. That has to be approved by a judge. This was approved and then renewed 3 separate times by judges appointed by Republican presidents.
Right. Which I think is a problem, that information that was unverified was used in that application.
But you believe they would have done that based on flimsy information?
That's the question at the heart of all this.
But you haven't read the underlying documents.
No, but we've talked to the people that have created this. James Comey himself said that the dossier was salacious, I believe was one of the words, and unverified.
He was only talking about that one part dealing with President Trump in Russia at the time. That was only referring to one small part, not the dossier as a whole.
So what parts of the dossier have been verified?
The underlying documents would show that. That's why I'm asking why you haven't read them.
And we've asked the folks at the FBI, we've asked the folks at DOJ, and they said there's none of that stuff. They've not been able to prove through other reporting that information was correct. That's unverified information. And at the time that information was included into this first FISA application, they knew that it wasn't verified.
I want to show a quote from your Republican colleague in the House, Paul Gosar of Arizona. He said, "The full-throated adoption of this illegal misconduct and abuse of FISA by James Comey, Andrew McCabe, Sally Yates, and Rod Rosenstein is not just criminal, but constitutes treason. I will be leading a letter to the Attorney General seeking criminal prosecution against these traitors to our nation." Will you sign that letter?
No.
Why not?
Because I think, is this a problem? Yes. Does it require further review? Yes. I'm waiting to see the DOJ Inspector General has a report coming out about review of some of the activities. We'll look at that. I think that goes a little far.
Congressman Hurd, thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Let's get some analysis now.